This presentation is Adolescence and Puberty. The presenter is Laura O'Rourke. Today we're going to talk about puberty and adolescence, which can begin as early as age 8 and last into the mid-20s. At times, puberty can appear to begin very quickly. This training will address not only the stages of puberty, but also highlight sexual, behavioral, health, and safety needs at this age, as well as ideas and solutions for tackling different challenges or subject matter with your child with special needs. This presentation is geared towards parents and professionals. Our agenda is to first discuss human rights, changes that we can expect in puberty, the importance of exercise and nutrition, different hygiene considerations, how to build skills for the future into adulthood, social skills needs, the being able to differentiate between public and private behaviors, dating and sex, safety issues, behavioral challenges, and medical concerns. When we look at the triangle in front of us representing Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what we notice at the bottom of the triangle are our basic needs that all humans need to have in order to function. Up front in the purple, we see that an individual needs physiological needs first and most importantly. Examples of physiological needs include the need for food, the need for water, the need for warmth and shelter, and the need for rest and sleep. Beyond that is an individual's safety needs, the need to feel that they are safe and the need to feel that they are secure and that no one will hurt them or harm them. Once basic safety needs and physiological needs are met, an individual needs to have their psychological needs met. First, we see a psychological need of the need to belong and the need to love. And here we see intimate relationships and friendships that can grow in this area of need. Above that, in the blue, are esteem needs. And this is when a person has the need to feel like they are meaningful and that they have accomplished something. And on top, in the orange, are the needs of self-fulfillment. And this is when you feel like you've reached your full potential, including any creative activities or talents that you might possess. And the whole point of Maslow's hierarchy needs is that our basic needs must be met first. And then we can look to meet our psychological needs. And finally, if those needs are met, we can fulfill our self-fulfillment needs. But first, we have to talk about puberty. These are a few terms that are associated with puberty and adolescence. Let's familiarize ourselves with the terminology. One of the important things to do when you're working or loving someone who's experiencing puberty and adolescence is to use the correct terms for what is happening. And this can alleviate stigma and stereotype and just get to the core of what is happening with an individual and their body. The terms that you see here may be isolated to the United States, and therefore you want to look at your own cultural terminology and discuss with your team and with your partners who and what the terms are in your culture. But the point is that you want to use the correct terminology. When we look at boys, changes that we might expect to see are growth spurts, where an individual is going to grow very fast and very rapidly. Here we might see an individual who has pain in their body because they're growing so fast, and that may be something to keep in mind. Body odor is another change that boys experience, particularly body odor in their hair, their armpits, and their genital area. Bigger hands, feet, testicles, and penis are all indicative of changes that boys will expect to see. Increased muscle mass. A boy's voice will deepen as he becomes a man. And facial and pubic and underarm hair will appear. Different considerations for boys that one might need to plan for are nocturnal emissions, erections, the decision on what kind of undergarments to wear or underwear to wear, boxers versus briefs, and shaving. Changes that girls will expect. We begin to see that girls start to develop into adolescence and puberty even as early as 7 years old and as old as 14 years old. Growth spurts also occur in girls. Girls will develop breasts. Also, underarm and pubic hair will start to grow. Body odor in the same areas as males. Vaginal discharge will occur. And women will start to begin menstruation. This is typically 1 to 2 years after the initiation of those first body changes that we'll see. Different considerations for girls might include the need for breast care or bras, any menstrual care, birth control, and being able to see the obstetrician and gynecologist. Social implications may also be very prevalent in girls, particularly that girls are required to increase social skills and social skills training, self-esteem support, training in identity exploration, and support in social involvement and social activity involvement is also considerations that should be looked at for girls. When we look at the area of exercise, what we'll see is that sedentary lifestyles, or lifestyles where an individual does not have a lot of exercise or movement in their day, contribute to increased risk of early death and chronic illness. Exercise has been shown to decrease aggression and the effects of social rejection and anger as well. Improvements in attention span, social behavior, and learning have been shown in individuals following aerobic exercise. And exercise is associated with many benefits to cognitive, psychological, and behavior functioning of individuals who have autism spectrum disorder. When we look at the importance of nutrition and what we eat, that is one area that we start to see in puberty and adolescence, in particular of individuals with developmental disabilities and autism, that they may be able to exert an amount of control and wanting to make sure that they're growing and becoming more able to communicate their needs and what they want. And so some of the areas that we look at is making sure that healthy eating occurs, especially when a person's body is growing and they need so extra calories because they're growing so fast. We want to make sure that the food that they're eating is healthy foods that's going to be productive in their growth rather than than not. When we look at the myplate.gov, which is the United States food recommendation chart, we see that grains and vegetables are the two areas that are where we want to see more food eaten, and fruits and protein and dairy are also on there. Some ideas for how to encourage proper nutrition: one would be to cook together and to see what goes into the food that you're eating. Trying new foods and offering different foods and new foods to an individual who is going through puberty and adolescence is a way to emphasize nutrition. Having nutritious snacks that are available for them if they need to have a snack or if they're extra hungry. Making sure that those snacks are healthy. Making sure that you don't bring junk food home and that the food that's at the home and at school and at work is healthy food. And we also want to encourage the child to be able to suggest or have input in what they're eating. That will also encourage more independent nutrition behavior. Hygiene is an area that is very important for adolescence and puberty. Good hygiene not only helps an individual's health, but it can also improve their self-esteem and their independence as well. We want to hit the trouble zones, or the areas that when an individual is going through puberty and adolescence, these are the areas that will be of most trouble as far as being able to maintain a healthy hygiene habit. Hair, sweat, body odor, any shaving needs, and teeth and breath. The example on your right is a daily hygiene chart that you can use for teenagers, and it describes the different hygiene tasks that are required for adequate hygiene. For example, in the morning, having the individual bathe or shower or wash their face, shave if needed, putting on deodorant or underarm care, putting on clean clothes, brushing hair, eating breakfast, brushing teeth, and then any morning chores that might occur. In the evening, we see a bath or shower or washing face, putting on pajamas and brushing teeth. And then also it's noted that at some point during each day, there should be some exercise, and that at some point during each week, nails should be cut. And this is a nice way for an individual to mark what's going on in their week and track how they're doing. Additional hygiene and kits might include a shaving kit or pictures of step-by-step instructions for how to do a hygiene routine. Here you see different visuals from Little Friends Center for Autism in Naperville, Illinois. The first one is a shaving kit where you can take pictures of an individual using a razor or an electronic razor and shaving their face. Another example is a task with modest pictures on how to conduct menstrual care. And finally, at the bottom is a bathing board that goes over each step of each body part that needs to be washed and how to go about washing that body part so that there's proper hygiene that does occur. When we teach hygiene skills, there are a number of tips that we can use to make those skills more productive and more successful for the individual that we're teaching. One of the first tips is to break down that skill into smaller steps. And then we'll want to teach those small steps individually. So one way that you can do this is to start with the first step in the process and move on to the next steps after the first step is mastered or that the individual knows that first step. Another way to teach small steps is to start with the last step in the process which is called a backward chain, and then move to the earlier steps in sequence after each following step is mastered. We really want to make sure that total independence is our end goal. Different ways that we can teach hygiene skills is to create schedules, charts, steps lists, and visuals that can help teach the individual what steps they need to do so that they complete the entire hygiene routine. At the bottom of the page, you'll see an example of a task list where we can teach small steps for hand washing. So one way that we can teach hand washing is to start with that first step, which is to wet hands with water. Once the individual learns how to wet their hands with water, then we'll have them independently add soap and briskly rub their hands together. Once they are able to independently do 1 and 2, then we'll help them with step number 3 to rub their hands, wrists, and fingernails at least for 15 seconds. Then when they're able to do 1, 2, and 3, we'll teach them and help them make sure that they do 4 independently, which is rinse their hands under running water. And then finally, after they are independent in 1 through 4, we'll teach how to dry hands with a paper towel or some sort of towel and turn off the water. Another way that you can teach these skills is to start with step 5. And once step 5 is independent, then the individual would move on to steps 4 and 5 independently, and so on until the entire sequence has been learned. A few areas for future skills that are going to be required for individuals as they become adults are basic living skills, home skills, independent living skills, community participation skills, vocational skills, and school skills. When we look at the basic living skills, these are areas such as being able to dress, being able to conduct effective hygiene skills, being able to do basic chores and basic daily care. Toileting skills are also included in basic living skills. So these are all of the functional living skills that one would need for any life. Home skills are more about being able to participate in home routines such as cooking, cleaning, participating in chores, helping around the house, etc. Independent living skills are all of those skills that one would need comprehensively to be able to live on their own. Community participation skills may include public transportation, talking with strangers, being able to participate in eating out, or participating in social activities outside of the house and as part of your community. Vocational skills are any job requirements that might be required for the future. And school skills would include being able to sit and being able to learn, being able to wait and follow directions, being able to participate in group activities. An excellent resource is the Assessment of Functional Living Skills, and the website is also included. This is an example of one of the pages for the Assessment of Functional Living Skills. So this one is housekeeping and chores, and it breaks down each of the different areas of housekeeping and chores step by step to see where an individual is at. You can also create your own step-by-step skills teaching strategies for any skill that you're looking to teach an individual who's going through puberty and adolescence, and any individual in general. But these are areas that might be appropriate for the individual that you are with. Social skills are very important to an individual who is experiencing puberty and adolescence. The participation in community activities is one of the very important ways that an adult and an adolescent is going to be able to interact with their world. and making sure that they have the skills to be able to participate in community activities is very important. We also want to make sure that an individual has not only the ability to perform independent leisure skills, but also a great variety of leisure skills that they are able to do on their own independently. And these would include hobbies or looking at a magazine or different areas where they would be actively engaged, even if they have to be left alone for a period of time, that they are actively engaging in their world rather than not having anything to do. And these are areas that we would have to teach some individuals to be able to do. And we can do that by teaching step by step. Creating, building, and maintaining friendships is another area that we want to focus on, particularly in adolescence. One way that we can do that is by using same-age peers and individuals who are typically developing, but also same age, to help build friendships and show the individuals that we care for different ways to interact with our community. This not only increases sensitivity by our same age peers, but also peer buddy programs have been very beneficial, not only for individuals with developmental disabilities, but also for individuals without developmental disabilities who participate, and it's mutually beneficial. We also want to consider social age appropriateness for an individual. For example, their hair, their clothes, and different interests and hobbies. We would want to try to target towards something that would be age appropriate for their same age peers. For example, if you have an individual who is very focused on balls with cartoon characters, maybe working on introducing them to different kinds of sports balls, such as a soccer ball or another kind of ball that they would be able to relate socially with their same age peers, and something that would be age appropriate as they grow into adulthood. And that's something we want to consider for the individuals that are adolescents, is that transition from childhood-based activities to activities that would be appropriate as an adult as well. Another very important area to look at during adolescence is teaching public versus private, and the concept of public behaviors and public areas versus private behaviors and private areas. The first way that we can do this is by defining public and private behaviors. A public behavior is anything that a person can do in front of others. A private behavior is anything that you should not do unless you are alone. So, for example, if we look at the picture to the right, who can see me naked? Who can see my underwear, and who can see my private parts? These are different examples of behaviors and scenarios that the individuals that we care for can come into. And we want to make sure that they understand which of these are private and which of these are public. Another way that we can teach private versus public is to identify locations that are public and private. For example, the bedroom, the house, school, the bus. All of these different locations we can put in a label of public or private. We can also do the same for behaviors that are public and private. Finally, anytime we're trying to change behaviors, we have to teach a replacement behavior or a new behavior that the individual can engage in instead of the other inappropriate behavior. So how would that person meet their need in an appropriate way in public, for example? What can that individual do instead? And so we want to make sure that they have something to replace perhaps a behavior that they're inappropriately engaging in public, and provide them with something else that they can do in public that would be appropriate. The example on your right is an activity that you can create where you have different behaviors, different locations, or different scenarios that are in picture representation that you can match for whether they should be public or private. You can also do this as a conversation for individuals who have less significant needs and who are able to engage in more of a conversation base than needing pictures. And you can have that same discussion on what is public and what is private and go along the list of each behavior in each location and why is it public and private. Sex education is a tricky topic, although it is important for adolescents. It should be individualized and it should be appropriate to the person's need. Our end goal is always independence, personal safety, and personal well-being. Some topics that may come up may include birth control, pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, romantic relationships and dating, homosexuality and gender issues, personal values and preferences. All of these areas are important areas that may come up as an individual experiences adolescence and puberty, and we should be prepared to at least have some information for that individual so that they're getting the information from us, people that they trust, rather than from the public. We want to consider that if we don't teach this information, how is that person going to get the information instead? What might they assume? Is that the way that we want them to learn about this particular issue? And finally, and most importantly, is the information going to prevent them from harm? Are they going to be safe from emotional or physical harm? And what kind of information can we give them so that they are safe? When we look at safety, a few things to consider. One is that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities are estimated to be 3 to 4 times more likely to experience sexual abuse. Individuals with autism are at an even higher risk for abuse because of a few factors. First, the lack of social awareness cues. Second, the lack of communication strategies in order to refuse advances. And lack of independence in activities of daily living, which allows them to be vulnerable to individuals that may be required to touch them in places that are private in order to maintain health and hygiene. There are many ways that we can prevent sexual abuse. The first and probably most important area is education. Not only education for the individuals that we care for, but also education for the individuals who care for them, as well as the public and the community. Rehearsal or practicing situations and making sure that the individual knows what to do in an emergency situation or in a situation where they may be vulnerable for abuse and sexual abuse. And finally, emergency responses. What should you do if this does happen? What are the emergency responses that we should have and that we should teach the individual in case of an incident of sexual abuse? Another area that we want to consider is at least by age 14, looking at what is this individual's life going to look like 10 years from now or 4 years from now. As they grow into adulthood, what are they heading for and where do they want to go? And what are their life goals? And to help plan for that transition so that there's years ahead that we have time to plan and to address many of these issues before they transition out of school and into adult services, for example. One way that we can teach safety is by categorizing different relationships in somebody's social life. One of the examples that you can use is called the Circles curriculum, developed by Stanfield. And here there's different classifications of people that go into different categories. And we identify how close or how intimate they should be from the individual. And so, for example, the individual starts in the purple circle, and then we fan out in stages of distance. For example, after yourself would be your immediate family, followed by closer friends, which is followed by acquaintances or people that you don't know very well, but you do know them. And then community helpers, and then finally strangers. So here we want to talk about and teach what is appropriate physical touch for each of those categories and what is not okay. And also about what kind of trust level you should have for different areas and different people in your life, and how people can touch you. For example, strangers should never touch you. They're not people that should have any physical contact with you at all. But somebody in your acquaintance circle or your casual friend circle, you might be able to give them a handshake or a high five, for example, and that's okay. But then it wouldn't be appropriate for them to touch you anywhere on your chest area, for example. So once we've identified the appropriate talk, trust, and touch for each of the circles, we're going to practice and role play those scenarios so that the individual gets lots of practice on how to behave with different people. Finally, we have to teach that individual how and when it is appropriate to say no. This example is an example of something that would require the individual to have many prerequisite skills or skills that they already know. For example, an individual who would use a system like this is going to need to be able to differentiate colors. They also should be able to differentiate different people in their lives. And so this example is something that would be for somebody who has less significant needs, and somebody who can follow along with the concepts that are sometimes vague for social interactions. This probably would not be appropriate for an individual with more significant needs or more significant communication issues. Another way that we can teach safety in adolescence is by creating very clear rules. For example, if you pull your other people's hair, that is not being nice to friends. If you take turns, you are nice to friends. Another example would be teaching how to keep your hands to yourself in public. So practicing different times that you would keep your hands to yourself. Talking to your friends, eating lunch with other people. You're not going to take their food and touch them while they're trying to eat. You're going to keep your hands to yourself. When you're playing board games, making sure that you have enough body space between one another and practicing that. So these are different ways that you can teach safety in adolescence through rules. Social stories or social scripts are another tool that can be used. These were developed by Carol Gray. A social story or a social script is short and to the point. These stories are written in first person, as if you were talking to yourself. They typically describe a social situation or something that is about to happen, and they detail the expectations of that situation and for how you should behave in that situation. Often we use pictures that are in addition to the written words when we write social scripts. Another example of safety in adolescence is to teach self-regulation. This is an example of a zones, a regulation sample. And another resource is the incredible 5-point scale that teaches different levels of coping or different levels of being able to manage yourself. So with this example of A, who really likes trains, The zone is the different color and the different train. And we had A label each of his zones to personalize it. And then what we did is we spent time working with A to develop the different categories underneath each zone. So with the I feel section, each of the colors was labeled specifically for A and what A feels like during each area. And as you can see, green is the zone that we'd like to stay in. That's when we are happy and productive and learning. And sometimes you're a little under the weather. You might be sick, or you might be tired, or you might just not feel like it. And that would be considered A's blue zone. And A described, and we helped A describe what that feels like for him. And then as you start to become anxious or agitated or angry, then things begin to escalate into yellow and red. So yellow might be when you're just having a bad day, or you're a little anxious, or something's new and it's making you nervous. So while those are all the different emotions that you might feel that in the yellow zone. And then in the red zone, this is when you're just very, very angry, and you might lose control and not have as good of a sense of what is appropriate and not appropriate for you. Beyond those feelings, however, are things that people do and things that we can see for when they may be in one of these zones. And this is very helpful for people to be able to identify, what does that look like for you? And so here we have had a label, and we also helped, oh, I see that you're doing this. Let's put that down. What zone do you think that that is in? And that's helped A, and also the people that work with A, identify behaviors that he does that indicate which zone he's in, which is also helpful for us, because then we can identify which zone he's in and how we can help. Which brings us to things that trigger this zone. So these are the things that might cause a different zone to happen. So if we're really happy, we talk about things that A really likes and enjoys, and things that make him happy, and things that he wants to do. And so we would put those under that category in green, such as reading a story, playing with Legos or friends or his sister. And then what we also did was, what causes you to be in your blue, yellow, and red zone? And this is from A's perspective again. And then finally, because our goal is to be in the green zone, we want to have strategies for what can you do to get back to green. So if you're in green, it may be, what do you need to do to stay in green? But then in the other zones, it's what can you do to get back to green? And these are all self-help coping strategies that A can use personally to get back to green. And it's very helpful to have personalized ways to teach self-coping and self-regulation. This way the individual can really have more meaning with it, and they may be more invested in performing those different behaviors and those different skills to get back to that area where they're able to learn and be productive. Behavioral challenges are something that can occur in adolescence and puberty. Sometimes we'll see arrival of new behaviors that the individual has never had before. We may see an increase in current challenging behaviors. We might see the beginning of masturbation or touching yourself in public places in inappropriate areas of your body. We may also see inappropriate exchanges with others. A few things to consider when you do see behavior changes and behavior challenges is you want to make sure you rule out any medical factors or medical causes that may be contributing to this change in behavior. And then you can use behavioral interventions to address these behaviors and to teach new, more appropriate behaviors. Medication management may be something that you want to look at as well. And that would require talking with a medical professional and seeing if that's a choice that is right for you. Ways that we can reduce challenging behaviors. We want to address and answer the following questions. First, what does that behavior look like? Because we want to know what does it look like to an outside observer so that everybody knows what the same description is, so that we're all on the same page. Second, we want to see why is the person doing that behavior, and there are 4 reasons why people do what they do. The first would be for some sort of social attention. The second, to escape or get out of something. A third is to access an item or a thing or an activity. And the fourth is to meet some automatic sensory need that is more internal. Then we want to look at what causes that behavior. When does the behavior not happen, or when is it more likely to happen? How often does it occur? So we want to know how frequently it happens, and how long it lasts, what the duration is. We also want to know how intense or dangerous this behavior could be for the individual or for others in the community. What could the person do instead of this behavior? We want to identify different things that we can teach this individual to do instead that are productive and meaningful and that would be effective in replacing the more inappropriate behavior. And then we want to be able to teach that new skill and teach new, different, and safe alternatives for them. We also want to make sure that we identify how are they going to know, how is the individual going to know that they are doing a good job, that they are on the right track. And so once we've answered these questions, we can write down a plan. And we can also measure the behavior to see if our plan is working. One example intervention for masturbation, which is a very common topic in adolescence, is the blue circle. And so here we see a social script that is helpful for an individual where we wrote down what's going on. And then we also have lines, or maybe we use pictures, where we can teach the individual different things that they can do instead of masturbation. So let's read the story together. Sometimes I like to put my hands in my pants and grab myself. When I do this, it makes me feel good. When I want to grab myself in my pants, I will try to wait until I'm in a room with a blue circle. If I am not in a room with a blue circle, I can pick one of the following things to do. I'd like to point out that there is no judgment in this story. It just sticks to the facts of what happens and what can I do instead. And this is often something that's helpful in teaching new behaviors, particularly when it comes to adolescence and puberty and behaviors that might be associated with it. We want to make sure that we're teaching the new skills, and our goal is that the individual is safe and productive and is able to transition into adulthood. Seizure activity is also a medical concern that can occur in adolescence and puberty. While statistics and research varies, it is suggested that anywhere from 7% to 42% of individuals with autism spectrum disorder develop a seizure disorder in addition to that. Seizure activity in individuals with a developmental disability is also 4 times higher than the general population. Seizures that occur in adolescence can be as high as 1 in 4 individuals with autism spectrum disorder. There are some potential behavior signs or behavior changes that you might see that may indicate potential seizure activity. Things that you might want to look for and rule out and seek medical attention for may include if the individual is experiencing unusual behavior for them, are visibly disoriented or confused, and that's different for them, that there is jerking of arm, body, or leg movements, increased falling, increased complaints of headaches. With people who are nonverbal, you may also see increased self-injury, unexplained sleepiness or weakness, and potentially loss of toileting skills after the individual has experienced independence with the skill. If you notice any of these atypical behaviors or symptoms, you want to seek medical attention to rule out those factors before treating that as a behavioral issue. Medical concerns, when it's more than just adolescence and moody behavior related to puberty, we also want to rule out medical care if we notice any very quick, abrupt changes in the following: increased crying, shouting, or laughing for no clear reason. The start of pacing, rocking, rubbing hands together, or picking at skin. Aggression such as hitting, biting, scratching, headbanging, or throwing things. If the appetite of the individual has changed significantly, such as eating significantly more or eating significantly less than they had before. Also complaining about headaches or stomach aches or other body aches. Sleep changes, if they're sleeping significantly more or less than normal. Trouble falling or staying asleep, or experiencing nightmares that are abnormal for them. Seeming confused, having trouble focusing, or seeing things that may not be there. And moving more or less, a change in energy or activity level, actively withdrawn behaviors, or not doing things they used to enjoy. These are areas that an individual might need to seek additional medical care and may be indicative of different depression or anxiety or other issues that may be happening that can develop in adolescence or puberty. So in conclusion, puberty and adolescence brings a number of significant changes to the individual and their family and caregivers. We want to make sure that we start the education early and individualize these lessons and these education strategies for the needs of that young adult. A great way to do that is to use teachable moments and to be approachable so that the individual feels that they can share still with you and feels comfortable with keeping you in the loop of what's happening. Using education, visual aids, schedules, routines are all extremely important and helpful in successful transitions through puberty into adulthood. We want to make sure we're considering the age appropriateness of skills, overall independence, and lifelong skills at all times. We want to be gearing the individual towards being able to be as independent as they can and to reach their highest potential. And we want to protect the safety, well-being, and rights for the future for the individual. That concludes our presentation. If you have any questions, you can contact the person who's facilitated this video, and they can follow up with any questions and receive input. Thank you very much.